Hello, I'm Denise Lucy. It is my great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 125 Marin women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the County of Marin and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community. It is a great privilege to acknowledge and document their contributions. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce Barbara Salzman, who is being honored in the class of 2015 for her pioneering work in the environment. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
You know, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I've known about your work from a distance and have experienced the benefits of it as a community resident in Marin County.
Well, thank you, and I'm thrilled to be here, needless to say. Not just for me, but for the environment and all the people that I've worked with through the years. I couldn't do it myself. Just need a lot of people to do the kinds of things that I do.
I can understand that. And you actually didn't begin here in Marin. You were actually moved from Pennsylvania.
I moved from a little suburb of Philadelphia called Upper Darby, and it had basically no natural environment left, just a ball field and a local Quaker cemetery you couldn't go into. And so I wasn't inspired by that. But I was, I was an only child, and my childhood did set, as I think back, the groundwork for my doing what I do, because I grew up with the sense that I could accomplish something, and also that I had a relationship with my father that we argued a lot. And so I noticed through the years that a lot of people really don't like to get into situations where there's going to be arguments or differences of opinion. But I find that challenging. So anyway, I thank my father
Right.
for setting the groundwork for my being able to get into these situations, which are, often disagreeable. Don't you always agree with? We often don't agree with
Right.
with people on the other side, whatever that
Right.
is.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? Public policy is complicated given the many voices. And one voice in your life is your husband, who wanted to actually move away from Pennsylvania and to find a place with more open space, I understand. Right?
Well, my husband, yes, we met on the East Coast. He's a periodontist. He was at school in Boston, and he said, I don't want to live here. There's no open space. And so, I moved with him here, not because of the open space. I had no expectations of what that meant because I didn't really know what it meant. And so anyway, that enabled me to get into the environmental arena area.
So what was it like for you moving from Pennsylvania to a place like
Well, I
Marin
didn't
County?
think about it. I mean, I didn't think about, about the natural resources at that time. I just, I had to fit in because I didn't know a soul except him. So that's what I was focusing on. Then I had a baby. And so, and then how I got into the environment was really taking him out with Mrs. Terwilliger.
Really? You knew Mrs. Terwilliger?
Oh, yes. So.
Well, she's an honoree as well.
Oh, I know that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yes,
yeah.
Of course.
So she had a group where she took little kids out and their parents, and so it opened up, the world to me because I didn't understand. I think I had one biology class in college, and anyway, so it was interesting looking back and seeing how I got into this sort of by the back door. It wasn't intentional.
Right. Well, your education actually led to a master's degree in social work, and
yes,
you work
I have
in
a master's in
psychiatry.
Oh, I worked in a child guidance clinic, and I worked in a mental hospital in Pennsylvania. Before moving out here.
So that was your professional work. When you came to Marin, did you continue in that profession?
No.
Did you? So how did you actually move from that profession over to working with the environment?
Well, as I say, I went out with my son, with Mrs. Terwilliger, and then somehow I got involved in fighting a shopping center development that was proposed in Larkspur. And it was supposed to be a sort of village-type shopping center where the Molly Stone Shopping Center is now. And so that was defeated. There was a group of us. I joined a group of community people and joined the group that was proposing and working on the general plan in Larkspur. And I called up Audubon people and asked them to come and tell me about birds, and they told me all the birds that I would expect to see on the creek, and then they invited me to join the Conservation Committee, so that's what got me going. I began to read EIRs, and that was the beginning of CEQA, was the mid-late 70s, and so I felt like, I was learning along with everybody else because nobody knew what they were doing. There were no real professionals. There were just, they were professionals. They were paid people, but they were feeling their way the same way the community was. So
interesting. So EIR meaning Environmental Impact Report. And maybe you could tell our listeners what CEQA means.
Oh, the California Environmental Quality Act. And that's what the law that requires that people often complain about it, but it is the law that requires that potential environmental impacts be reviewed and identified for the public. It's a public information disclosure document, and I can name you a couple of situations, serious situations that would have really benefited from having CEQA, but they were before CEQA, so there were no requirements. People didn't know the impacts that they were going to have in their projects.
So that was in the early days of CEQA, wasn't it, when you were first
began
your project?
Yes, it was the beginning of CEQA. CEQA, I think, was enacted in the early mid-70s. Yeah.
So you've been with Audubon, for 30 years? Does that sound
about
right?
that?
It's actually, as
probably longer, right?
I recognize that. Around 30 years.
Yes.
So there's so many projects that you must have done with them. Of course, in the leadership role you have now, is there any one or two that you think stand out for you as a
I think the one that stands out most for me is the protection and restoration at Bahia, which is a 632-acre site we purchased in 2003. But before that, and that's a whole story itself, before that there were like 20 years of fighting off development because the property owner wanted to build houses. Over the 20-year period, the development got smaller and smaller, but it was still in wetlands and it was still in these wonderful hillsides. And so we were finally able to purchase it after a referendum in the city of Novato that the people voted more than 60% to, I think it was 68%, that they didn't want the development there. And so that set the stage, and the property owner called us up and said he was willing to sell. So
you talked about purchasing the land. There's a whole story around that, developing an organization.
Yes.
Could you talk about that story, how that got developed?
Well, 20-some years ago, a small group of like-minded people, maybe they were reacting to me because I kept complaining about the look at there's all the agencies are all buying properties in other counties. And
which agencies are those?
Oh, the Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife Service, and
why were they buying properties?
well, they were buying wetland properties to contribute to the bay. You know, they were all good properties, but I felt like Marin County was being sort of shortchanged. And so we gathered together and began an effort to influence decision makers in the county. We did field trips. We developed fact sheets and hired a scientist to talk about the importance of baylands. And so basically and then we decided we needed to go further, that we needed to purchase them if we wanted to protect them. And we saw that how critical they were for the bay. So, the turn of the century, turn into the 20th century, the property owners often diked off big sections of wetlands, and so they were left with a lot of dike baylands around the bay, particularly left in the North Bay. And so these are all part of the bay still. We consider them, they could be restored to tidal marsh, then they still function even if they're diked as...
So what happens when they're diked? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a bad thing for the bay. They were diked for agriculture, they were diked for development, and it basically removes the water that the tidal marshes need to sustain themselves.
So your group sought to purchase some of this property.
Yes, we wanted to purchase whatever. We did a survey of those that were left in private ownership, and we set about to try and purchase what we can. And we have done pretty well. Yeah. We have a lot yet to go, but we've purchased probably more than 1,000 acres of baylands.
What I read was that you had identified 8,000 acres, and that so far you started with several hundred, and now you've gone over 1,000.
Oh, we've over 1,000.
That's remarkable.
What's left is ones that are in agriculture. The big ones are still in agriculture, and that's better than housing, or it's better than shopping centers. But it would still be better if they were more tidal marsh or more marshes. So anyway.
So in that process, I suspect that you had to go to Washington. Did you?
Well, I'm involved with a lot of organizations. I went to Washington with a few different ones. One, the joint venture I've gone with, and the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, to promote wetland protection, funding for wetlands. And it was an interesting experience. It was going to Washington. It's all that power, and just the system that it's set up. That even here too, that legislators expect to hear from you, and they expect to know what you want, and what's the ask is the common thing. And thinking about it, that's the way it should be. They represent us, and they need to know. More people should go actually, because they shouldn't just be hearing from the paid professionals.
Well, that's true, isn't it?
They should be hearing from.
So you and your team learned the process over how many years were you doing this kind of advocacy work with Washington?
Oh, well, that was only a piece here and there, most of my work has been in the county, in the Bay Area, and with our supervisors and city council people and the agencies. The agencies work with Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the California, now their name is also the Department of Fish and Wildlife, BCDC, Bay Conservation and Development Commission. And the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They've been really important.
So this organization called Marin Balin's Advocates, you and others started that, correct?
Yes.
And that's the organization that helped start purchasing the land?
Yes, that's the organization that we meet once a month. We're still meeting once a month. And we developed, we strategize about how to go about doing the purchasing. Marin Audubon does actually the purchasing because they're a 501c3, but Marin Balin's Advocates are extremely important, and they help raise funds, and they're the ones that began to do the public outreach, the education, fact sheets, and tours that originally got the supervisors and others interested.
So you talked about all those who actually work with you, and that makes a difference. When you raise money, individuals give this money, or organizations?
Well,
companies?
That's what we piece together funding from lots of different places, foundations, agencies, and private individuals are very important. We're trying to buy a site right now that we're still fundraising, so that would always be helpful to have the individual. We welcome all donations,
of course,
and need them. You know, we're still trying to raise the money, but it's right. A matter of piecing together. We don't usually get, one big chunk of money that enables us to make a purchase. Usually, it's private funds and public funds.
And so you said 1,000 acres. How many projects does that represent, for example? I don't have an idea what 1,000 acres means in terms of projects.
We purchased, the largest one is the 635-acre parcel. There have been 5 or 6 that have been between 30 and maybe 120. And then there's maybe 20 others. We've also bought up small pieces of wetlands that were on the list for delinquent taxes.
So you spent so much of you spent how many years in this work?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Probably 40-ish.
40, and it's really as I read it, it's really volunteerism that you.
Oh yes, I don't get paid. Fortunately, my husband supports me. Right.
We all thank Jay for that.
Yes, I'll pass that on.
Yes, because without your kind of advocacy, it's a diligence that it requires.
Oh,
isn't
yes.
it? It's like a full-time job.
Yes, it is. And there are actually a lot of people like me. I mean, maybe I'm a little more extreme than a lot of people, but there are a lot of people that do the kinds of things that I do that don't get paid. And there's a challenge in that, too. I mean, as long as you're able to support yourself in some way or another,
sure.
It does give you a freedom that you don't have when you're paid by some entity, whatever it is.
Well, I've been in Marin County for around 20 years, and frankly, you're a legend. I've never met you,
oh, thank you.
And it's really something that I admire. I admire you so much, and I'm so happy to have a chance to meet you. So you spent your life doing this. Why did you do? What's the pivotal moment that made you do this?
Oh, I don't think there was one. I think it just sort of gradually evolved, and it evolved because of lots of things coming together, because it's a challenge, and I like that. There's a lot of good people, so it's a partnership with others that give you a sort of camaraderie. And I know that the work, I mean, I got started because I really was interested in protecting wildlife, because I think that they have a right to be here just as the same way we do. And then I really have evolved to realize that what's good for wildlife is good for people too. So if you protect, the wetlands, if you protect the streams and the creeks and the woodlands, they all do wonderful things for people, and they're the basis of our surviving health in a healthy way also. So
well, I've read that that's really your philosophy, that this work does, it's not just only helping our animal friends, it's really critical to our community and to the people who live in it. Is there any one that you can one or two people you can think of that helped you along the way?
Well,
in whom you have admiration?
The main person who got me going in this was Jean Starkweather. She also was a former honoree. she invited me to join Audubon, and she was a mentor early on. So she was the main person. But there are a lot of people that have helped through the years, and I can't say that I have. One of the questions was do you have a person that you admired that was
Yes.
what do you call that for you? And
Inspired you?
Inspired me. Yeah, I really don't. Except for Jean. She was an early. I never thought of it this way, but I suppose I think that I have kind of. Well, in a way, started new grounds or something. I mean, I do things in a slightly different way than a lot of other people, I guess.
So, meaning your advocacy is different from hers? Meaning
yes.
your ability to make an argument that's
No, I don't know
credible?
that mine. She has her strengths, and I have mine. Everybody has their own.
Sure.
I do things a little differently than and that's good because otherwise, if everybody did things the same way, you wouldn't need so many people, and it would be a less interesting world and probably a less effective one.
So I bet your celebrations, once you actually able to raise this money and you buy this property, then what do? How do you celebrate?
Well, I move on to the next thing. Well, I mean, we have a celebration. We're happy, of course. But a question that people often ask me is, don't you get down? Because we don't just buy properties, and that's difficult in itself. We also do advocacy to try and get people not to develop in certain places and to protect to protect habitats on properties that developers want to develop.
I see. So you're not just being reactive, you're being proactive?
Right.
So how does that work?
Well,
how do you identify those projects?
Well, we get on the lists of various government agencies, and they let us know. And that's part of the public process. I mean, everybody has a right to do that. You do too with with your project over there.
Yeah.
But it's been people say, why do you don't you get discouraged? And I have to say I do get discouraged, but it doesn't last very long because. I move on to the next thing. I'm involved in so many things I can't get down because I have to get up for the next sort of challenge.
Well, as you say, busy people are more effective, right?
I guess that's true. I don't know.
So you've been decorated many times for this work over the years, and we're so honored that the Marin Women's Hall of Fame is inducting you this year. So you've done public policy work for so long. Any advice you can offer to upcoming leaders, emerging leaders, for what one needs to really do well to be able to be successful?
Oh, I can name a lot of things. The most important one, at least for the work that I've done, is persistence. Because as I said, almost all of the big properties that we've purchased, we've been working on trying to get development not done for 20 years for most of the properties.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have to hang in there. But you also have to, for young people, you have to have a vision, and I think that even if you don't achieve all of your vision, if you don't have a vision, you're not going to achieve any of it. So you need to have some kind of a vision and stick to it, and do your homework, and speak intelligently and treat people respectfully. Don't sometimes people get really nasty. And that's not necessary. You don't win friends by doing that. And so, well, that's about it. Diligence and
a few dollars and supporters.
Right.
And also, of course, partnerships. Mm-hmm. So when we think about the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, our goal, of course, is to support the advancement of women and girls. So do you have any specific advice for, let's say, upcoming women who might be interested in public policy work? Because it seems kind of like are there enough women in the field?
Well, I think there are quite a few women in the field now, and I think there could be more men, actually. But I don't know that means, I think everyone should be advocating for good public policy. Right. And of course, I would recommend that people advocate for a healthy environment, because that benefits us all. But I would say stick to your vision, get a vision. You know, what do you really want? What do you want to accomplish? And you can kind of change it as you mature, but try and work with other people to get others to, because you're more effective in public policy circles. If you're out there by yourself, you're probably not as effective as you would be if you have people behind you, because the public policy people are all electeds, and of course it's important that they have support in their community, and it's our community too. So it's important to make sure they know that we're all interested in having a healthy environment, and especially these days with sea level rise coming up, that's a big concern, because we might lose our wetlands and lose our developed areas too if we don't pay attention to what's going on with the rising oceans.
That's a dreaded thought, isn't it? Are there programs that Audubon does with youth to engage them in the future?
Audubon is that we don't do so much with, but there are different levels of Audubon. But yes, Audubon California is doing work with youth, and they're also doing work with sea level rise, and of course protecting birds is a main priority of all of us. There's the California Audubon and Marin Audubon. We have local chapters, and then national Audubon. So we all work together, but we're a separate 501c3, so we're separate also. It's a kind of interesting situation.
Well, we're fortunate to have you in our county to help us from the past to the future to make sure that we have a great place to live.
Well, I'm happy to be here, needless to say. I didn't expect to be turned out like I have, but it's been a wonderful challenge and inspiration, because I think if I were not here, I probably would be doing something quite different, because it's what's here in Marin County that we need to value so much that has, I think, inspired me and primarily kept me going.
Well, it's just an honor to be with you today and for sharing your story with our listeners, and thank you for the extraordinary work you've done for our county.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in and learning about the lives and accomplishments of Marin women who've been honored by the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you.